Okay, cool, done. Right, okay, so I do apologise. Took me a little while to get things organised. Things are a bit special today. You've got more going on than you might expect, as it happens. This is our monthly Curse of Strahd Dungeon Master Q&A or questions and answers. I provide you with some additional information, so I do have prepared material, but this is your opportunity to ask questions. And I have a special announcement, but we'll get to that a little bit sooner, later, rather than sooner, later. That would probably be what's going to go on. The sound seems to be all right, so that's good. You'll let me know if there are problems. I'm going to say hi to you. Is it Wow8, who's patron, should I say, and Rage Waven. Yep, hi, how's it going? Jasper's here. Hello. Okay, so let's get organised. Make sure to grab some food, drink, get settled down. We have an hour to discuss as much as we possibly can. I have far too much information to try to give you in an hour. I don't know how I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do the best I can to move very, very, very quickly. So get comfortable, and let's make this all happen, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Well, actually, it's the Curse of Strahd. Once a month, we sit down and discuss the Curse of Strahd. It's an opportunity for people to ask questions about the Curse of Strahd. It's also an opportunity for me to present some ideas and concepts you might be able to use in your game, or you might decide you don't want to use. These aren't like written in concrete. These are always presented as options to you. And if they don't sound like I'm presenting it as an option, that was actually my intention, never as a definitive. Because honestly, I don't care how you run your table, that is up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how to homebrew the Curse of Strahd, and some of the things I did in my game, and some of the things that I know other people have done. And I know people are freaking out when they see the image and thinking, oh no, he's going to talk about Sesame Street or the Muppet Show. Well, I just couldn't help myself. When I saw this picture and I thought homebrewing Curse of Strahd, it just popped into my mind. I knew it would rattle some cages. But no, I'm probably not going to talk about running the Curse of Strahd like the Muppet Show or Sesame Street. So don't freak out for those of you who are wondering what the heck is going on. You are safe. Trust me, you are safe. Okay, now that that's done, I want to go through the menu for today. We do have a menu for today, and the menu, as it happens, has quite a few elements. I was trying to keep it under control, and I had a lot of trouble. I could have added more. I decided in the end that 13 was an unlucky number, and that was the best place to stop. Okay, so we're going to cover the fortunes of Ravenloft. We're going to talk about Rudolph van Richten. We're going to talk about the Blinsky dolls, the random encounter tables in the adventure book. We're going to talk about the third magic gem seed that is not discussed in the Wizard of Wines. So there's a Wizard of Wines winery vineyard, right? And there's that one gem. We just don't know where that is. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that to a certain extent. But each one of these is going to get its own separate discussion at some point. But we're going to go very broadly over these. And I'm going to talk about my personal experience and what I did. Okay, the next one, we're going to definitely talk about Strahd von Zarovich. Okay, I've already done a video on it, but we'll still talk about him. I've actually probably done 2 videos on him specifically. We're going to talk about where the characters might start in Barovia when you're starting your adventure. We're going to talk about the Mad Mage of Mount Barton. Yes, that's right, the Mad Mage. We know who that is. Moving on, we're going to talk about incorporating the dark powers or dark lords or dark gods into your adventure. And I know a lot of people want to do this, so pardon me, we're going to do that. We're going to talk about the way that magic and spells works in Barovia because it works differently. This is all around home brewing, okay? For those of you who are wondering, well, what the heck is going on? There's a lot of stuff going on here today. What are you doing, Fred? Are you trying to blow a gasket? Yeah, probably. We're going to talk about the Tarot card deck and reusing it outside of the Curse of Strahd and using it within the Curse of Strahd for a different purpose. We're also going to discuss the mysterious circle of stones over by the old bone grinder. Like, what is that? And then the third thing we're going to discuss is expanding the races living in Barovia. Those are all the topics we're going to discuss today. Now, for those of you who are thinking, whoa, that's a lot. Well, you're right, it definitely is a lot. By all means, go #question, and I will keep going back to the chat to see what people have to say. What I want to do before we go into the topic is I want to announce something. Something happened, quite dramatic, and I needed to sort of calm down the company that I was helping with this promotion, you might say. There was a set of dice that I put on my community page. It's the D&D WoW Mind Flayer Hollow metal dice set. Okay, these things are pretty amazing. Now, when I put that up and I included a link, or should I say a coupon code, which is FredFan2021, okay? All of that information, surprisingly, is actually very, very easy to find. Don't worry, it'll be sorted out if you don't know where it is. But D&D WoW sold so many sets of this dice that as a result, they wanted me to do a review, and not only did they want me to do a review, they wanted me to promote the product more, because apparently you guys in the community bought so many dice, they did not know what to do with themselves. And I think that's kind of amazing. So they said, Fred, we want you to do a giveaway. We want you to give away some of these dice. And I said, okay, fine. So who's going to be included? Well, guess what? The whole world. If you live on planet Earth, you can enter the giveaway for these dice. If you live on the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, or any other planet, okay, you are not included, so don't bother applying. But if you're on planet Earth, you're all good, and they will ship it to you. Yes, they will ship it to you. I won't, they will. So that's how it's going to work. How many dice sets? Well, they said one. And then I heard the word something else, another word. I'm going to come back to them and see if I can't get them to cough up a few more, but we'll see how we go. So what I've done is down in the description, you will find a link to King Sumo, and you can pump in your email address and do a couple of things there and get yourself a better chance of winning these dice if you want them. Now, if you already have them, it makes a great gift for somebody. I think these are probably one of the better sets of dice I've ever seen them put out. So, there's a couple of other things they said they wanted me to mention as well, for those of you who are wondering. While you all guys are all running down to the description to see what the what you have to do down there, it's pretty simple. It's not like you have to do an awful lot. It's very, very simple. They also said, well, guess what, Fred? We also have a green set of these Mind Flayer dice, these hollow Mind Flayer dice. And I said, well, yeah, cool. I kind of like the first one more, but I thought I would at least show you them. And they also said they had a purple set. For those of you who like purple rather than bronze or black, and you want purple, well, you can actually get a purple set. It's getting sold on their website as it happens right now. They also said, well, we went a bit crazy as well, and I was like, okay, white ones. No, they're not white. They glow in the dark green. They glow in the dark hollow Mind Flayer dice. Okay, all right, so that's an awful lot of stuff to sort of get your head around. I totally get it if you think that I am out of my tree for trying to promote a giveaway in the middle of a live stream. Now, here's the thing with me. I don't do that sort of thing. Okay, I don't do giveaways on my channel. I never thought they were a very good idea, and they never sort of produce the results that you really want. And I don't want a whole lot of people who have really no interest in my channel who just want to show up to get a prize. But given the situation, and D&D WoW really wanted to do this, we're doing it. So my suggestion is enter. You might as well. Go for it. Right, let's get back to business, right? For those of you who are now wondering what you should be doing, down in the description. Now we've got a question from Jasper before we go into the homebrewing process of the Curse of Strahd. Question is, how much should I write without overwriting a session? Look, there's no golden rule. You know, if you go and watch videos on YouTube, you'll get a different answer from every YouTuber. And that's because they're writing from their perspective based on what they are used to, what they feel comfortable with, and what they think is the most sensible thing to do. Okay? My suggestion to you, Jasper, is just do what you think is going to be enough and what you have time to do, because time is always a factor. So do that. If it doesn't work, then change it. There is no golden rule, I can assure you. This is why I don't do videos like that. You very rarely see a video on my channel that says, you should do things this way, not that way. Usually I give you options, and I might give you the pros and cons of them if I know them or I'm aware of them, but I don't usually tell you, you should do it that way. Okay? That's not how I operate here. Okay, I'm hoping that answered your question. And I know a few people won't be happy with that answer, but look, bear with me, there's a good reason for that. Let's talk about the first thing that crops up in the Curse of Strahd, and that is the Fortunes of Ravenloft. Now this is integrated into the adventure so that the whole story is modified and homebrewed for every different gaming group. That's been deliberately done by Chris Perkins, okay? The design team have done that so that it allows for you to deliberately homebrew it. Now, when you build in a structure like that, and it's using the Taroka deck, or you can use normal playing cards, that tells me one thing. They expect you to homebrew the Curse of Strahd, okay? In fact, I think they really want you to do that. So don't get concerned that, particularly when you get people who say, look, no, this is how it should be done. You know, I played the original Ravenloft, and this is how it should be done. I've run the original Ravenloft, okay, for those of you who want to know. I've run Curse of Strahd, and I can assure you, you can do it whatever you like. The fact that somebody else might decide that you should do it a particular way, look, do it your way. It's your table. I don't know why they would be invested in what you're doing at your table. So that means, for me, since that section on page, it goes from page 11 through to 18, sort of talks about what you can do to change things up. So don't shy away from that. Now, a lot of people are wondering, okay, so how does that work? Well, I've done a video. The Fortunes of Ravenloft, there's a video on how to actually go through the process of selecting those cards. What are those things actually going to do? What is the actual purpose of those cards? Well, what they do is they locate things for you, and it's a very simple process. There's not an awful lot going on here, but what we've got is we want to make sure we know where the Tome of Strahd is. We need to know where the holy symbol of Ravenkind is. We're going to be placing the Sun Sword using this card reading, and we're also got to determine who's going to ally with our party. You know, who could potentially be an ally for the party. Also, where are they going to have their final climactic battle with Strahd? This is the whole key behind this. Those elements in themselves are just the beginning of what you can do. Now, for those of you who want to know specifically how I did it, you could watch my video, but also this is what I did. I followed the book. I did my reading in advance, so I had that all laid out, and I had like a diagram. I think I drew 5 boxes, labeled them so I knew what they were for, and then put down their position, and then I went and checked those locations within the adventure. So that's how I approached it when I was doing it. Now, when they meet Madame Ava, the fortune teller, they can do another reading. Now, the reason you do the reading before they meet Madame Ava is because they may wind up going to one of those locations or interacting with a location where one of those things have been placed before they go and meet Madame Ava. For those of you who are wondering, why would we bother doing it before the adventure and then after the adventure? Well, I can tell you that's the answer. That's the reason why you do it. Okay? That doesn't mean that it's going to void it. You know, if they go and meet Madame Ava and they don't get their fortune told, because it's entirely possible but that your players might say, no, we do not want our fortune told by Madame Ava, there may not be a card reading. So that's why you have that backup card reading before you start the adventure. Okay, so they do their reading. Now, what happened with me, and I'll go into more detail about this a little bit later because that's part of the elements that I've discussed, aspects of modifying and homebrewing the adventure that I talked about already, but that's further down. And that is they went back and talked to Madame Ava again. And they were specifically looking for what was going to happen to their character in the future. And so that's where I had to homebrew and change things. I had to give each character a very specific, or a very general but specific answer, okay? So that's what I was doing with that, and I will discuss that more. But that is part of homebrewing the Curse of Strahd. I'm just going to chuck my eyes on for a second, just to make sure I haven't... Now, if you haven't put in a hashtag question, I probably will miss you. What do you got here, John? I think I just spotted some sort of question there, but it's just not hashtagged. Any tips for getting more into character before a session instead of trial and error during a session? Look, I mean, you can practice. A lot of people say just practice. Practice is where it's at. I mean, whether you practice in the toilet, in your car, in the shower, it doesn't really matter. Practice is one thing, but I think that you will find that learning to relax is half the battle. If you can find a strategy that allows you to relax before your game session, it's going to be much easier to role play any kind of character. Now, whether that be playing a player character or an NPC run by the Dungeon Master, it's the same process, okay? And I've done videos on how to relax. So you just type in, how to relax before your D&D session or something like that, and you should find the video. There's lots of different ways you can do that. Okay, Colin, what's the best way to hook my players to Castle Ravenloft? I have a treasure located there. Okay, so first off, you don't need to get your players to go there. They will go there eventually. I can assure you, they will eventually go there. Now, there might be a treasure in Castle Ravenloft, yes, but that might be selected or picked up later on. They may not, in fact, get that treasure at all. It's entirely possible that they may never... Look, my group didn't get the Sun Sword. They never found the Sun Sword. They had the cryptic statement from Madame Ava, and they just could never find out and figure out what that meant. They figured out everything else, but that's the one they did not figure out. And that's fine. That's all right. Those things happen. So you don't have to push them there. They will go there eventually. What my players did is they were very reluctant to go and face Strahd straight away. So they went and they tried to form allies within Barovia. And then once they've done that and built it up, and it became obvious that Strahd wanted to meet them, then when they felt they were a bit more comfortable about continuing forward with their story and maybe facing Strahd, because they didn't know if Strahd would attack them or just talk to them. And so I presented Strahd outside of Ravenloft many, many times before they ever went to the castle. So you don't have to force them in that direction. Okay. Hashtag question. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to whip past you. Okay, right. So let's get on to the next question. Next part around modifying the Curse of Strahd, homebrewing it. Okay, so Rudolph van Richten, his involvement in the story and his interactions with the party there's a few ideas offered, but it's mostly open to interpretation by the Dungeon Master. I can't really give you page numbers to sort of refer to. Off the top of my head, from a quick look around, it's scattered all over the place. Page 254 to 255 has like a journal entry that gives you some hints in terms of... you don't even have to use the journal entry. You might find that they never actually come across it. Page 238, page 208, those are all pages. There's more, okay? But I would like to point out, when I ran Richtevo or Rudolph van Richten, they didn't know it was Rudolph van Richten. As the adventure sort of portrays, it's not obvious that it's him, okay? Unless they know about that particular individual, they probably wouldn't be able to figure it out. And this happens with many of the NPCs in the adventure. So what did I do? I played out the character. They had a minor interaction. It didn't go anywhere, and that was about it, okay? And then he was out of the picture. Now, Rudolph van Richten for my group was actually their ally. Initially, when I did the first reading, okay? That was their ally. But they didn't really do what they needed to actually follow up on that character. And so they missed out. He moved on, and I allowed his character to sort of bleed in to the world and do his own thing, because he's trying to keep a low profile so that Strahd doesn't pick him out and take him down, which is, of course, exactly the sort of thing that Strahd would do and then torture him until he loses his mind. So Rudolph van Richten didn't actually show up until the very end of my adventure. That's when I decided that I would bring him back. So they had minimal interaction with him. Their interaction consisted, as it happened, with a discussion with Esmeralda, who knew of Rudolph van Richten, but they only got that information in the form of, I'm looking for a friend. They didn't know anything more than that. My players really had to read between the lines. Many of my players also had dungeon mastered this adventure, so I had to change things. I absolutely had to change things. Some of them had already played through part of the adventure, so I could not run it exactly as might have been laid out in the book, and so I had to shift things around a little bit, and you might find the same thing. And then, as I said, the tower, there's a tower in this adventure where he leaves a trail, but he's not actually there in my game. It's only when they finally decide to take all their allies to Castle Ravenloft and take Strahd down, that is when he shows up. Okay, so he's been watching them the whole time, and that's how I did it. Now, you can do it any way you like. There are so many different things you can do with Van Richten. And I imagine that with the new book coming out, we're going to get even more information about how you might go about doing something like that. Because it's entirely possible that he could wind up traveling with your party. It would be a great option if you have a very small group of players and you need them to have like an NPC traveling with them, okay? All right, so do we have any questions here? Here we go. Oh, so somebody's asked, should you be trying to avoid or, Look, if the party do the right thing and collect a whole lot of allies, that's all right. That's their purpose. But not every ally is going to survive. I can assure you, Esmeralda was an ally with the party, travelled with them in my game, and got killed. Okay? Strahd has ways of taking out the allies in ways that are quite horrible. And so when it comes to characters perishing, I will often target the NPCs so that the number of allies goes down. But that doesn't mean you need to write them all off, okay? It's all right. They will eventually, if the party keeps going, they're going to beat Strahd, because they will simply become more powerful than Strahd. And Strahd knows this, okay? He may not know it initially, but he will figure it out later on. And that's how I played my Strahd. Okay, question in here, I believe. Should I invest in a battle mat for the Curse of Strahd? That's up to you. Are you playing in person? Are you playing online? If you're playing online and you just want to point the webcam at your face so you can talk with your group if you're playing online, and then just you can just tilt your camera down to your desk if your desk is big enough, and have your battle map in front of you, and then run your encounters with your battle map. That's up to you. If you would prefer to use a virtual table, then use a virtual table. This is a personal sort of thing. I don't think there's I do a lot of online play and a lot of play at the table using theatre of the mind. The only time I don't use theatre of the mind is when either my players they want the battle map and I can't get them around at their head out of that, and they're like, no, I need that battle map, and I'm like, oh, come on, take it easy. But some players need that, or if the combat is so complicated, I can't keep it all in my mind. So that's something to bear in mind is, personal preference. You don't have to use the battle mat all the time. You don't even have to use one at all. Okay, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. You got a question here. How to prepare the town of Vallaki. Yeah, prepare that town of Vallaki for a horrible death, mate. There are like 6 vampires spawn in the coffin house. They ain't got a chance. The characters arrive from the east gate. However, the campaign details the starting events at the west gate. Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the church. Okay, so here's the thing. This is another question we need to talk about is like, where do you start? Don't worry about it, okay? All you do is you have a basic idea of what's going on in that location and then work your way through each section. It's reasonably well structured, so you've got big headings and you just go to that section and you work out what you're going to do based on that. There's not like an easy fix for dealing with Vallaki. Vallaki's a large location and there's quite a lot going on. And then once the players, if they ever go into the coffin house, I mean, it is just bedlam is going to occur. I can assure you. In my game, Vallaki got wiped out by those vampire spawn. The whole town just got wiped out. Strahd had been trying to take them down for ages. This was the opportunity. Somebody was stupid enough to wake them up. My player characters, all my player characters got decimated in that battle, and that resulted in them winding up coming back in different bodies because their bodies were so badly mangled and destroyed. Okay. Right, so working my way through here to see if there's any more questions. #question. Otherwise, I will probably not read your information. I do apologise, but if you don't do it, I did pin it. Did you ever get the revised Curse of Strahd module? No, I didn't. There's lots of changes, but I just don't see any point. Yeah, I just didn't see any point. Honestly, I didn't see any point in getting it. The book was good enough, and the kind of changes they made to the revamped one, there's too much politically correct stuff going on there. I'm not really politically correct, so I wasn't interested, frankly. I like to have, quirks in my adventure. I don't want it to be sanitized. My decision, running my game, I don't want it sanitized. I do it how it was originally written. And the new stuff, I don't care about. That's just me. Okay. Hi, Slice of Scott. How's it going? Blah blah's here. How's it going? Matt. Hi, Matt. How's it going? All right. So, yes, you should go and check out the dice giveaway competition down in the description. Go down there and check it out. Okay. And yes, that top 10 iconic monsters video was a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know, Wally has got 10 more videos to release. He's going to take the big one, and a lot of the information and stuff that he shot for that, he had to leave out. So there's going to be, I think I've convinced him to release a video on each monster separately as individual, so it'll be shorter, much shorter, and they will include, hopefully, some of the left out content that he decided to leave on the cutting floor. So, and we've also got the Dungeon Master Roundtable discussion. So all those YouTubers you saw are probably going to wind up in a video chat discussing everything under the sun. Okay, so lots more to come. All right, now moving on to the next question, which was the locations of the Blinsky dolls. Where are they found, and what do they do? Okay, this is hinted at in the adventure, but it's really left to the Dungeon Master to create. There's really, one of the things I found frustrating is if you read through the Curse of Strahd, it doesn't actually state where the Blinsky dolls are located. There's one location or one individual NPC who seems to have quite a few of them. But other than that, it's really up to you to figure out what they do and where they are. And that is, and look, I've done a video on Blinsky dolls and what you can do with them, but in terms of where you would place them, you place them where you think they're going to have the biggest effect. Okay? So, I wish when I was reading through the adventure, I wish that Chris Perkins and the design team had actually spelled out that they intended for people to take these concepts and expand them and shape them and present them in a way that made sense for their story and their adventure and the group of players at their table. And unfortunately, you don't really get that in the adventure. Well, this is one of the things with older adventures that were designed, when there was an aspect to it that was supposed to be designed and built by the Dungeon Master, Gary Gygax, or whoever he got writing the adventure for the introductory series, they would actually leave a section empty and then state that the Dungeon Master would fill in the gap, or that the Dungeon Master would have to create something. They actually would put in at least a sentence to say this. Wizards of the Coast doesn't do this. This frustrates me a lot. So as a result, you have to go through numerous interviews with Chris Perkins and other people who were involved in the whole creation of the book to find out that that's what their intention was. But it's not spelled out in the book. Kind of frustrating, I have to say. But what can you do? We do what we can. Okay. All right, so I think I saw a question from blah blah. Pretty sure I did. Darken Smith. Hello, Darken Smith. Right, so yes, the next question on our list here is from blah blah. My party consists of paladins and priests, and a druid, and so on. Everyone will be throwing radiant DMG damage around. How do I counter it? I don't think you do try to counter it. You've got to understand that the Curse of Strahd has got some things in it that just straight out fighting it won't work. And just because the encounters have been built a particular way doesn't mean you can't change them. So, for example, if I were to give you an example of an area where things got very complicated for my group, and they were a very strong group. There were 7 players. I had at least 2 clerics in the group. There was a paladin. I had a few other characters that weren't dishing out radiant damage, but they were quite high level, and we were at the Amber Temple. And in the Amber Temple, there is like a funnel effect. There's a gauntlet of death set up. You've got a creature waiting on the other side that is in a statue, and then on the sides of the balconies are what are flaming skulls. And these flaming skulls, what I had them do is, because they're so small, they would duck down below view so they couldn't be seen, pop up, fireball, duck down. And I did that constantly. So things like casting spells at range were a problem because as it happens, a lot of the spells that cause radiant damage don't have a long range. So you can put those flaming skulls quite a lot further back, okay? So they don't have to be quite so close. That forces the players to either split, and they didn't split, they all went down one side to try and deal with one, but that meant the other one up on the other side was still popping up and down, taking pot shots at them. They were forced to use cover. The concept of readying an action came into play. So it gets complicated as soon as you deal with monsters that have cover and have ranged attacks and can do a lot of things. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, you know. Frankly, if they barrel through the adventure really quick, is it really a big deal? If you don't want that to happen, then change things up. Currently, my own home group, what I do with my group is this, is all the monsters in the monster manual are antique. They're obsolete as far as I'm concerned. Okay? There's not a single monster in there that my players can't crush like a bug. With all the multi-classing feats, subclasses they have available, their experience, which is significant, they can deal with anything. So I max out all the hit points on all my monsters. I don't use the average. That's just the average at the top on the stat block. I make it I put it at its maximum. Every time a monster makes an attack, I take the average damage, which is beside the one in the brackets where you roll dice. I don't roll dice for damage, not that way anyway. I take the average damage, I roll a 6-sided dice, I add that 6-sided dice result to the average damage. That means I'm doing on average about 3 more points of damage compared to the standard monsters. On top of that, every time they face a creature that is on its own and there's nothing else around them, I will probably give it legendary actions. And when I make a legendary creature or have a legendary creature, they don't have 3 legendary actions. Okay, they don't just have 3 points. My legendary monsters take their action on their turn and at the end of every single player character. Okay, that's how I counter players who have really beefy, strong characters and that are min-maxed to the nth degree, because I do have some power gamers in my group, so they are capable of doing that sort of thing. But you'll find your own way. I mean, that's just what I do. You could use some of that. You don't have to use all of it. You could use some of that if you wanted to. All right. So hopefully that answered your question, blah, blah. All right. So moving down here, looking for hashtag question. Hashtag question from Troy. Hello, Troy. How do you know if you have the revised version of the Curse of Strahd? Usually on the inside cover and the first couple of pages where there is the credits. If you look in there, it's usually down the bottom by the ISBN number? There's a number that all books get. And there's usually an indication there. So, for example, if I grab my book now, and just open it up, it's just the page just before the contents page. And if you look down at the bottom, okay, you'll see a picture of the cover, and then you'll see a number, and it says EN, and then it says ISBN number. And underneath that, it says first printed March 2016. Now, in terms of the version that you've got, it is usually, my eyes are just not good enough to be able to find it. I know it's there, but that's where it is. Okay, that's usually how you figure out what version you have. Anyway, so hopefully that answered your question. Leave the book up because I'm probably going to have to refer to it again. Okay, so next, hopefully that answered your question. Okay, Diago. Hello, Diago. Hopefully I got your name right. How do I handle wealth? The book isn't specific on that point, but says that prices are 10 times in Barovia Village and 5 times in Vallaki. I'm confused as to my players are going to get any gear. It takes a lot longer to buy gear in Barovia. There's a lot less treasure in Barovia, a lot less money. That's done quite deliberately. There's no way that the party are going to get everything they want straight away. Okay, that something like plate mail or full plate mail is probably not going to happen very quickly. So once they figure out the pricings for things, so 10 times whatever the price is in the player's handbook is going to be pretty rough. The price of 5 times in Vallaki, that's where they're probably going to go and buy all their stuff. But once Vallaki gets wiped out by 6 vampire spawn, which is entirely possible, might not happen. It might not happen. It's your game. But if it does, then they're probably not going to have to buy anything. They're just going to go through and raid all the houses because everybody's going to be dead. Something my players actually wound up doing, if you're wondering. Okay, Trombol. I think it's Tromboli. You have a question. Does the Blood Spear force the party into combat? That's what my DM does. Look, your DM can change the magic items. Just because it says how the Blood Spear operates in the book doesn't mean they can't change that. So I can assure you I changed many things in my game, okay? So if you're worried about how a magic item is supposed to work, forget about how it's written in the book, okay? If you've been reading through the book, which you probably shouldn't be doing, or checking on the internet. If your dungeon master is having it operate a particular way, that's how it operates, okay? I know that's not necessarily the answer you want. If you're playing in something like Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, then that's a different kettle of fish. Okay. All right. So, drink of water. I have hardly got through the stuff I wanted to cover today. This is going to be very, very difficult. I've got to make sure I don't lose my voice too. Next question is Jeff. How often do you use random encounters in Curse of Strahd? How often should Strahd himself make his presence known to scare and manipulate the players? Okay, so this is actually taking me, Jeff, to some of my other questions. So I think we already covered. I talked very briefly about the Blinsky dolls. Let's talk about, because the next one I wanted to talk about was random encounters, and this is exactly what you're asking, right? So we're talking about pages 200, page 28 through to 33, and this is really basic information. It's a prime opportunity to homebrew. How often should you present an encounter? Is like how long is a piece of string? It's a question that can't be answered. You do it based on what your players are doing. If you don't want your players to rest too often, then have more random encounters. If your players rest in places that you know are dangerous and are stupid to actually rest up, then have something happen. You can just roll on a dice. I don't like just rolling on a dice, because if it's just left to the dice roll, sometimes you get odd results. Things that just don't feel right, or just don't seem right, or just put too much pressure on the players, or don't put enough pressure on the players. So leaving it completely to a dice roll, don't worry about that. You're better to tailor it to your group. So that's the answer I have with regard to that aspect. As for Strahd himself, there's no golden rule about how often and when and where specifically Strahd should show up. Okay? There's no golden rule. What I did is I made a video not so long ago about meeting Strahd multiple times, and you can find that on my channel. And then basically all I did was give you how you could do that. In terms of discussing how often, that's a different kettle of fish. That's really up to you. What works for you? Okay? This is why I say when it comes to the Curse of Strahd, it's about homebrewing and you making a decision as a rational individual about what is going to work for you, your players, and the story. Yep. We'll come back to it in a second for those. I do have a little bit more to say about that. I do want to just make sure I've finished all of the questions before I jump on to my next little piece. Jay Birmingham. I think that's Jay Birmingham is next. What's your question? Do you combine combat encounters with traps, puzzles, and counters that has to help beef up the encounter? Yes, I have. Some of the best traps I've had are like a trap room, not a trap location where it affects just the first unlucky individual at the front, but the whole room. You step back 30 feet, it's not going to be enough. Those have been some of the more interesting encounters I've had. Did I do them in the Curse of Strahd? Yes, sometimes. Yes, I did. So yes, I have done that. And yes, you should do that. If your players like puzzles and they're not too hot on traps, if your players hate traps, you're probably going to make yourself really unpopular and you want them to keep coming back. But if they like puzzles, then incorporate puzzles. If they don't mind the traps, then include traps as well. Okay? And yes, you can use them. People have talked about beefing them up with, encounters up with traps and other environmental effects. Okay, Matt, question. Did you see the Cabal... what's that? I've missed it. The vampire spawn. There is a few other ones I've seen so far. Sorry, off topic. No, I haven't. No. Kobold. I haven't seen the Kobold vampire spawn. It's an odd idea. I like the idea. You know me. I am odd. so I'm all for odd. Okay, blah, blah. Question. I heard that the Death House is a bad way to start the adventure. Well, it's yes and no. Because it is seasoned dungeons and much more role-playing. Should I let them start at Vallaki? So this is one of the questions that I have actually lined up for you. So first off, my first answer about Death House. I've done a bunch of videos on Death House. There's a playlist on Death House. How to run it, what's likely to happen, how to escape the house, how to role-play Rose and Thorn, how to actually approach the house itself, because it's an entity, it's a monster at the house itself. So those things are actually covered in other videos. the Death House, unless you change it, is really probably only suitable for seasoned players. People who are not seasoned or even intermediate players will probably wind up struggling. And it's a horrible setup. I mean, frankly, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible. There are very few people who are successful in getting out of the Death House without the Dungeon Master making alterations. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to say, but I did it. Yeah, you're probably one of the very few. That's my point. Okay? You're just not aware of it. You just think that you're not special and that that's the normal experience. It's not the normal experience. The normal experience with the Death House is everybody gets just crushed like a buck. So you do have to change things around. Is that a bad way to start? No, if you make some alterations, it's probably quite an interesting way to start. Okay? But it's not the only way you have to start. We'll get back to that. Okay, next. Now, there is plenty of role-playing. There's plenty of role-playing in the Death House, okay? So when somebody says, no, there's hardly any role-playing, that's not true. There's plenty of role-playing taking place. And role-playing doesn't have to necessarily take place between your NPCs and the player characters. I had plenty of role-playing taking place between my player characters right throughout that house, okay? So that's not true. Anyway. Any more questions here? I don't think they... Toasty, hello Toasty. Hi Jonas, how's it going? The Lost Table, how's it going? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the next question on my list because we are running out of time and I have to make sure I have my voice for this Dungeon Master Round Table very shortly. Okay, let's have a quick talk about what happened to the third magic gem seed from the Wizard of Wine's vineyard. It is left to the Dungeon Master discretion. That's on page 173. Now, that's not spelled out. You actually have to find the interview where Chris Perkins says that's what he intended. He expected the Dungeon Master to create a story around that and where it was. So where could it be? Now, a lot of people have said, well, no, it must be, it must be stated somewhere. Well, no, actually, it's not. Some people have made it the heart of Castle Ravenloft. I decided that it was an unknown entity. That nobody knew where it was and that my players would never find the third magic gem seed. You could do that. You could decide not to do that. We were going to talk about this particular issue in more detail in the future, but it'll be a options video rather than a how to do it video. The other thing you might want to do is you might want to decide the pursuit of the magic gem seed might take place after they deal with the Curse of Strahd. After they deal with Strahd himself and defeat him, that's when they will pursue that magic gem seed. That would be your follow-on if you wanted to. You could do it that way. I know other people have placed it with particular individuals who have had it held it in confidence. I've had it, and not for good reasons. Usually it's a bad reason, okay? So you pick some of the more nefarious grey characters to sort of hold on to the gem. And it doesn't have to be... It doesn't have to be Bubba. It doesn't have to be the witch. Could be a lot of different individuals. Okay. Right. So let's check the chat again before I go back to the next thing we need to cover because we are running out of time. Diago, question. Again. Wealth. How do I actually give them any gold? Roll tables in the DMG? You can roll off the table if you like. You can decide specifically what treasure they will find on a particular individual. You could also decide that the players can take the gear off the individuals they defeat, or if they just, if they don't kill somebody but they strip all their gear off them and leave them naked in the streets, which of course can happen sometimes, they can go and sell that stuff. Okay? There are instructions in the player's handbook about how to go about doing that. All you've got to do is halve the price, and that's your sales price, okay? So that's how they could get money. So they can go and buy other stuff. It's just collecting the stuff, whether it be armor, shields, weapons, or other bits and pieces that the creatures or NPCs have. So that's another way of doing it. Or you could just create packages. There is actually a phone app that you can get called, I think, Treasure Loot. And I put it in the community tab not so long ago. I've done a video on it, discussing it, and it's really good. It's very easy to use. You can set it up to give you individual treasure packages. You can tailor it. It can produce a treasure hoard for you if you want a treasure hoard. But what you want is individual treasure packets, right? Something that's a lot simpler, not too vast, and you can do that with that particular app. All right. So that's hopefully answered your question. Dankin, hello Dankin. Trombolis. No more questions. We're moving on to the next discussion point. And how and when Strahd von Zarovich is presented to the adventuring party. Now, there is information on page 9 and 10 regarding Strahd. There's also a bunch of information, as it happens, related to the fortunes of Ravenloft. So this is going to give you some guidelines around that. How often and where is really up to you. My suggestion to you is don't make Strahd a stranger. I think Strahd should actually be somebody that the players have a lot of interactions with, particularly at low level, because this is the time when they will not want to mess with him. And always have Strahd with a whole lot of minions or with an escape route, just in case somebody at your table has tried to come up with some nefarious plan to take the campaign out of commission at level 3 or 5. And at level 5, player characters get incredibly powerful. It is possible for a smart group at level 5 to take down Strahd. It has happened, I can assure you. I have heard from Dungeon Masters who said that's what happened at their table. So now, whether that's because that's how the Dungeon Master ran it, or because the players were just ingenious, okay, the power differential between levels 1 to 4 and then 5 onward is significant. So present Strahd as often as you can. Certainly, this is the best time to do it, and in different ways. Okay, all right. Let's go back to the Q&A, just make sure we've got all that covered. No, we don't have any more questions. We're going to go back to our topic, which is number 7. Where do the characters start in Barovia? Has a few options provided, but there's choices. So we're talking about pages 18 through to 22. So we're talking about your adventure hooks. Essentially, the original Ravenloft worked like this. You went through the mist, and you came out, and there was the village of Barovia, and that was your starting point. You could also have them move out through the mist, and their first starting point is the death house, this haunted house that they've got to deal with. Now, whether it's connected to Barovia or not, that's really up to you. In my case, in my situation, I had the death house connected to the village of Barovia, but the mist had surrounded them in such a way that they could not see the village beyond that house. So I kind of funneled them into the house. Why did I do that? Primarily because I'm a YouTuber and I know that somebody's going to ask me questions about the death house, so I knew I needed to actually run the death house to see what it was like so that I could give feedback on it, rather than just relying on what other people had to say about it. Experience is the best test, right? Something you don't have to do in your adventure. Okay, you could present the house and that's the first house they go into, or they might go to the house and decide, no way are we going anywhere near that thing, and we're going to go into the village of Barovia. You could start them at the other side of the map, and this has been discussed a few times. I believe Jacob over at XP to level 3 has discussed changing up the adventure a little bit and starting on the other side at Kresk. Why not? So there's a couple of places you could start and a couple of ways you could do it. And then I'm sure there are more that you could use. It's just about how you think it's going to work in your game. All right. Let's just check our questions. For those of you who are writing stuff in there and are sort of, don't know why I'm not responding to everything, I just don't have time. If you don't have a question, I've got to move on. I will rewatch the live stream at some point, so I might get to see what you have to say. But if you've got something to say that's going to be helpful to somebody else in the live stream, that's an excellent thing. Okay, let's see, have a look. I see somebody asking a question about the bone grinder, but where was the last question we had? Where is it? Now that's the wealth question. I've covered that already. Okay. All right, okay, here we go. Do you find the old bone grinder particularly deadly? Yes, I do. My players never defeated the Night Hags. They were going to defeat them, but the Night Hags can move from the material plane into the ethereal plane. And so what would happen is my players would sleep here. They burnt the bone grinder to the ground, okay? But they would sleep here. But the hags were still in that location, so they would come in while they were sleeping and suck their life out of them. So their hit point maximum would constantly be dropping. They figured this out and decided they were never going to sleep in that location again. So that's how I did it. It's a very confined location, so it's very hard to get a large group into the bone grinder and have a battle with the hags, because there's just not enough space to move around. So it's not if you were to have to battle outside, it changes things up a lot. But inside the actual bone grinder itself, if the party's big enough, they won't have a problem. I found that my hags were using magic missile at range, but often in melee, because I didn't have to worry about hitting the target. Because it was just, otherwise it would have been disadvantage on attack rolls or some other problem. Okay, so I didn't do that. Jonas, your question. I'm introducing Strahd after my players exit the Death House. Okay, good. Okay, and offer a small thank you, but I want it to be short so that they can explore Barovia instead of engaging too much with him. Any tips? Yeah, go check out the video on introducing Strahd multiple times, or meeting Strahd multiple times. Look, I've heard of people who had Strahd meet the party, but Strahd had disguised himself, so they never knew it was actually Strahd. They actually think it's somebody else. And you might want to do that in this situation. You might decide that it's actually to disguise, them meeting Strahd multiple times. It might be an individual that they think is actually somebody else. So disguise them. Try that. See how that works for you. That means that they may not be afraid of this character, but you can use it in a way to kind of trick them and deceive them. So it's one way of doing it. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. Mohammed, how's it going, Mohammed? Question, here we go. Darkin's got a question. I know death is very much the end, but is it really the end in Barovia? No, it's not. How should it be handled? No, there's no how should it be handled. How can it be handled? Now, I've already done a video on death and dark gifts and the curse of Strahd. There's a video on that. That's up to you, okay? Some people have a rolling cast. Some people, like myself, said to my players, you have to, I don't care if you die, you have to keep playing the same character, no matter what form it takes. And I did some horrible things to their characters. Things that would turn your stomach. And one of them, I believe, wound up as a big pile of poo. But then at other times, one of them wound up as a revenant. So there are some benefits and there's some drawbacks, and you change things around. You don't have to use all the dark gifts, because you remember a soul can't leave Barovia. Its choice is to either wind up entering the body of a baby, and maybe you decide that their soul entering somebody else's body who's recently died, or wind up being a zombie or a ghost, or maybe they enter the body of somebody who's still alive. So there are lots of options. This is all about you homebrewing your game. So yeah, there is never a how should it be done. It's how will I do it, really. Okay, moving down through the questions. Chat. No questions there. Cool. All right. Now, next topic. The Mad Mage of Mount Barton was actually the famous wizard Wardenkainen. Okay. It includes a range of responses he would give. It is expected by the Dungeon Master to modify this NPC. Okay. Because there's a lot of questions that are not answered in pages 39 and 40. in my adventure, because I knew my players were aware of the Mad Mage and who the Mad Mage was, I decided they would never meet the Mad Mage. The Mad Mage is still in the world that I ran, but I did not let them meet him because I knew they would exploit that situation. Because your normal response from a party who meets the Mad Mage and the way the Mad Mage presents himself is the chances are that he's going to attack them and they're going to kill him and just assume that he's in trouble. They won't necessarily know who it is, because the adventure's written in such a way to suggest that you don't spell it out as a dungeon master, that in fact it is the famous wizard Mordenkainen who was unsuccessful in taking down Strahd. But that's up to you. We'll kind of come back to that topic because it's a really problematic. It's really problematic to put something so powerful into an adventure when you're trying to kind of juggle the threat level. So yeah, that's why I did it that way. My party never actually met the Mad Mage. Okay, number 9, incorporating the dark powers, lords or gods into the adventuring party's experience with Strahd or Barovia. Now, I decided, since my players started asking a lot of questions about the dark powers and how Strahd got into his situation, that they picked up a lot of information from NPCs over time. But ultimately, when they started looking like they were going to go after Strahd and take him down, I actually had one of the dark powers show up. And this god made it quite clear that they were interfering with something they shouldn't, and that in all likelihood the gods would step in and circumvent whatever they were going to try and do. And that shocked my players big time. To have a god say, look, you're messing with what we have set up, is very risky as a dungeon master. I'm not suggesting you do that. There are lots of ways you can incorporate the gods and just, things that they find in the world, the effect they've had on individuals such as Strahd and maybe other individuals within Barovia, some of the architecture that's left behind that might sort of highlight that they have a presence in that world. Look, when I looked at who are the dark powers, there's nothing actually spelled out. As far as I can tell, the dark powers, there's no specific evil god or entity that is spelled out as being the dark powers. So that's completely up. You can pick anything you like. You can do anything you like with that, and it would be fine, because it isn't spelled out anywhere. And even if it was, why would you not just change it anyway? Okay, right. Blah, 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 blah. I'm sure somebody in the chat has probably used the dark powers in their game and can talk about that if they want to. Okay, question. Tromboli. Okay. How do you handle the holy symbol of Ravenkind? If there isn't a good aligned PC in the party? Well, if there isn't a good aligned NPC in the party, then that symbol of Ravenkind is not going to work very well for them, is it? I mean, that's reality. That's a holy symbol that is probably not going to be very useful to them. If your players are going to build characters that are, have got an evil alignment or neutral, and they're playing in this adventure, I mean, that is probably the surefire way to actually make things very difficult for themselves. That's their choice, when you sign up and you do your session 0, which you probably should with this, that should all have been talked about. So yeah, build in the consequences. It's not going to be very useful to them if they don't have the right alignment. End of story. Or you change it. That's up to you, But as it's written in the book, if we look at the holy symbol of Ravenkind, let's have a look at that page very quickly. I'll give you a little bit more. But I do feel, this is one of the things I find interesting, is everybody assumes there should be a specific way to do something, rather than thinking, well, actually, I could just do it whatever way I want. Here we go. So it's got a few different abilities in it. And one of the requirements, for this wondrous item requires attunement by a cleric or paladin of good alignment. So if you're not a cleric or paladin and you're of good alignment, then you're not going to be able to use the holy symbol of Ravenkind, and so you're not going to be able to hold vampires, turn the undead, or use sunlight. Done. Pretty easy, unless, of course, you decide to change it. And you could. Okay, back to our things you can modify. Here we go. Believe it is number 10. The way magic and spells work in Barovia has its own section in the book for modifying it, and there are some examples on page, I believe it's 24. That's just a sample. So the players, you could make it quite clear to your players that they could change the way spells look when they cast them in Barovia to reflect the atmosphere, or you might decide, well, actually, I don't need to do that. All I'm going to do is focus on the spells that my NPCs and monsters and Strahd casts in the world. As the Dungeon Master, I mean, I'm in control of that part, right? So I can do that. If the players spot this and start asking questions, cool. Then you can say, look, yeah, you can change, you can personalize the spell and make it look different. And that is a big part of homebrewing. That allows you to come up with all sorts of very interesting ideas. And I've done a video on personalizing spells. There's a very good section in the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that covers this. So I would suggest checking that out. It's worth a read. And I think a lot of people have actually talked about personalizing spells as well. So another thing you can alter in your game if you wanted to. Let's talk 11. I believe I need a drink. Number 11. The Taroka card deck can be reused as a pseudo fortune teller tool in the Curse of Strahd or another adventure. This is on page 243 to 244. So I'm going to turn to that page now and give you sort of a quick example, because I used this in my adventure and I also used it in other adventures when I needed to have a fortune teller. And that one page is what makes it possible, because what it does is it gives you a very generic statement regarding the artifact, the beast, the broken one, the cards that are included, okay? So when you're drawing a card to present to your player and you have to come up with something, let's say the artifact, the importance of some physical object that must be obtained, protected, or destroyed at all costs. So you might decide, you draw this card, you read that passage, now what do I create and make up? What do I have to create for my player that's related to them? And you might say, if it's a fighter, you might say, there is a beam of light showing you the way to a blade of untold power that you will wield one day. But there are consequences that may be your downfall. Now, I've used that one line to create that fiction. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, what happens if they never find that item? As we know with fortune tellers, not everything comes true. So if it comes true and they find that item and it relates to what you've said, great. If it never happens, and this happened in my adventure when I was running the Curse of Strahd, some of them had things that they associated with that reading that I did with them, and some of them didn't have anything that they could associate with that. Some of them actually created nothing from it. I mean, like, how did you connect what I said to you when you did your fortune telling with Madam Ava to that particular event and situation? I could not see it, but they could. So you can leave that to the players to muck with. It's actually a very nice tool. Okay, let's have a look here in terms of questions, because we're almost out of time. Here we go. Jonas P. Question. The Taroka session placed the items at Madam Ava are, what's that? Van Richten's wagon is... I think what you're saying is, if some of the items are placed in locations that are easy to find, is that a bad thing? No, it's not. I mean, is it really a bad thing? I mean, the idea behind the Curse of Strahd, if you follow things how a lot of old school gamers would view it, is you had to have all the items to complete and defeat Curse of Strahd. But do you really need to have everything? Okay, you don't. So, I mean, I don't think that's something you need to worry about. If you don't like that, then change it. All right, so next one. Okay, moving on to the next piece that we need to discuss, because I've got 2 more things and then I've got to go and have a rest. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to talk with Wally DM and Dungeon Class. All right, so 12. The mystery of the circle of stones near the old bone grinder is begging for an answer to what it is, because there's nothing actually indicated in the adventure book on page 128 about what that does, what its purpose was. And one of the things I would suggest to you in terms of what you might want to do if you want to come up with something is look at all of the information either in video form or on the internet in terms of articles that talk about Stonehenge and what people think Stonehenge is. There's a lot of very outrageous concepts and beliefs and theories about what Stonehenge actually does and why it was constructed, and if it actually did have a particular purpose. Is it a place for UFOs to land their ships so they can, get out from underneath? I mean, who knows? I mean, was it supposed to be allow for a portal to be created to travel from one place on Earth to another, or travel through time? I mean, there's been lots of theories about what the standing stones at Stonehenge actually did. So there's a lot of options available to you. Just a little bit of research and you can build something with that. Now, in my game, I sat there and I sort of struggled as to what I would do with that. And I was thinking about doing something with it. And in the end, I didn't, because my players never really wanted to go back there because the night hags would keep draining them of life or hit points when they would sleep there. So they would zip past there as quickly as I can. So I never got an opportunity to actually expand on that. But if I had to expand on it, I would have looked at lots of different options. I feel like the Circle of Stones was put there for a purpose, and quite a significant purpose. Maybe it's around, witchcraft, conjuring something, summoning something. Maybe it's the conduit to talking to the dark powers, if you know what you're doing. There's lots of different things you could do with that. Okay. 13. Expanding the races living in Barovia, because they're mostly humans. This is on page 26. Now, I like races, and usually the idea, as discussed in the book, is that pretty much everybody in Barovia is human, or undead, or a vampire, or a vampire spawn, something like that. Okay, but everybody is essentially human in some form. So that means the only individuals coming into the world that aren't human might well be party members. Okay, so the player's characters might be, a dragonborn or a tiefling or a gnome or something like that, rather than human. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but there's nothing stopping you from changing the kinds of races that you could put into Barovia. I've seen this come up on the forums a few times where people have talked about how they took a small selection of races they thought would work, that they particularly liked the idea of being part of Barovia, and that's what they used. And I didn't see that there's anything wrong with that. I don't think you necessarily need to be tied down to Barovia as a place where there's only humans. Again, another place where you have an opportunity to homebrew your adventure. It doesn't have to be laid out. Hello, Kanoko. How's it going? All right, so I'm just checking through my questions because I also have to finish coming up with some material for the Dungeon Master Roundtable, and I know I'm going to struggle with the last question they have. I usually don't. I'm usually pretty good. I usually have multiple answers for stuff, but and you kind of have to with those sorts of things. Okay, so TC has a question. My party is 4 players. During the session 0, would you think it might be helpful to suggest companions like animals or a squire? Yes. Okay, so one of the best elements of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is the rules around sidekicks. And this gives you roughshod over pretty much anything. Okay, you can build sidekicks that can level up with the player characters, particularly if your group you feel is too small. I would say 4 players is probably enough, but if they're new, maybe you want to add a few more. Okay, my group was 7, and so therefore I really had to work hard. Either I had to change things or not change things, or I just needed to approach how I used the monsters in a very cunning way. So changing my tactics, using really good tactics. The rock is a great example of my players, didn't matter what level they were, I could mess them up. They did not know what to do about that rock, because it would just fly in as they tried to move across the bridge, pick one up, drop them off the side, they'd land in the river, take gobs of damage, and then wind up having to reunite with the party if they were still alive. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say in terms of that, other than sidekicks aren't a bad thing if you feel your party needs them. And you can include them at the beginning, or you could include them later on in the adventure. There's nothing stopping you from having a sidekick that is a black pudding, or let's say a mimic. I mean, it would be a very odd sidekick, but there are lots of other things within the adventure that they'll face that could wind up being sidekicks, or just a human. That's fine too. There's plenty of information in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. There's a bunch of information you'll find in the Unearthed Arcana, which you should still be able to get access to online. There's a bunch of information in the Dungeons & Dragons Essentials Kit, where you have the Dragon of Icespire Peak, but the book does include a whole lot of NPCs that you can use as sidekicks, and some sidekick rules to a certain point, but it doesn't go beyond level 6, I believe. Okay. All right, so next, so we're on TC. Kanoko, question. I was wondering how you handle having a what? A lycanthrope PC in your games. I've been trying to change, Grim Hollow's rule sets for Were Raven. Just looking. Yeah, okay, so I did have a person who transformed into a werewolf. They got bitten by a werewolf, they transformed, they had to fight off the effect. It took them a while before they actually lost control. When they did finally lose control, my party was in a position where they could have removed that curse. They had the spell. They were asking me, but if we cast the spell, will it work? And I said, well, just cast it and find out. But they decided not to, because a lot of the benefits that player had as a werewolf, the group liked. What they did not like is when the player lost control of their werewolf character, because either I had my player rolling a dice to determine whether they could control themselves, or whether I was rolling the dice and I changed things up. Trust me, I started rolling the dice at the end. Their party almost got completely wiped out, and that werewolf killed Esmeralda in my adventure, and my party were horrified. What was worse is it was a druid, and that druid had summoned a whole bunch of wolves. So you got a werewolf, a bunch of wolves, and the party's like overwhelmed. What had started off as an NPC, as a player character who was really useful to the group because he had so much firepower at his disposal, became the worst nightmare they could possibly imagine. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that way in your game, but that's how it played out in my game. As a result of some decisions the players made, how I ran things, and some dice rolls. And I'm all for having a surprise at my table. So it can be done. My player did eventually wind up meeting the player characters again once they had dealt with people who had perished, and rekindled themselves and got themselves back together. They did encounter that individual, and one of the first things they did was pin that individual down and cast remove curse and get rid of their werewolf ability. So hopefully that helps you. I'm hoping that did help you in some way. Okay, now I want to make it clear for everybody who has not necessarily had the answer, an answer to their question. Oh, hang on, is there anything else here? You guys are trying to keep me here. I need to keep my voice, guys. I really do. I've got to go to work very shortly. Question, would you forbid races, classes, or alignments for Curse of Strahd? I usually don't allow Unearthed Arcana. But just because I would stop people from using... I don't usually stop people from playing a race. I might stop them from playing a class. But all the standard classes I'm not really worried about. Anything in the player's handbook I'm not worried about, you know. It's not balanced. I understand that. It's cool. It's fine. There are certain things I don't like and I have excluded from my current campaign. But just because I would exclude stuff, I don't want to say that, you know. I don't really want my players coming into the Curse of Strahd as an evil NPC, as an evil PC, because I'm going to be trying to turn them to the dark side. Okay, I'm going to be going all Darth Sidious and Darth Vader on them, trying to force them to join the dark side. So I don't want them to already be there. Their fight is not about necessarily survival, but retaining their good spark. I think that's the battle we're looking at. It's the most interesting character development you can look at, and that's the one I want to keep. So alignment, I generally didn't want to have them be bad to start off with, but that doesn't mean anything, because it's not my decision. That's up to you. All right. Okay, and you can run the Death House at level 1. So, first off, we're going to be back in a month, and we'll talk about Curse of Strahd, because I do that every month. We come back, we talk about the Curse of Strahd in some way. So don't freak out, okay? Hello, Dutch. You're probably going to find that I'm not going to have time to answer your question. But you can try really quick. If I can answer it quickly and you type it in fast enough, maybe it'll happen. So don't worry. I'll be back in a month. We'll have another discussion. I have another topic for you to look at, and we'll go through that, okay? The next thing I would like to say is there is a dice giveaway. D&D WoW sold so many of the Mind Flayer dice set, Mind Flayer dice set, that they decided they want to give some away. So down in the description, you'll find a link so you can enter that competition, okay? And I'll see if I can't get them to cough up more than one entry. I really hope that I can. That would be great if I could. Anyway, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can enter it. Okay, so now that we've covered all of that, hopefully I have answered as many questions as I can. Okay, what do you got here, Dutch? How would you handle replacement characters? See, this is the thing. I wouldn't go with replacement characters. I did not let my players stop playing their character. If they played it as a ghost or as a zombie or as a pile of poo or as a revenant or as a zombie, or they wound up in the body of a small child, which has happened, or in the body of a milkmaid, which happened as well. That's how I played it out. I don't want to have a rolling cast in the Curse of Strahd. Okay, so I wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to give you advice on how to have replacement characters, because it's a pain in the butt. Frankly, I see it, you know. So I'm not giving you a hard time, Dutch, but I just feel like, you know, I am very old school in the way I think, I guess. I believe in lethality. I believe in not, you know, my players' characters not being superheroes and facing monsters and they being scary. But I'm not really tied to, I make the decision about whether they have to roll up a new character or make a new character. I always leave it to my players. You'd be surprised. When you leave it to your players, I often have my players say, I want to make a new character rather than continue with this. Sometimes that doesn't work. Okay, but in this situation, I wanted to torture their characters as much as I can, and dying was not going to be an escape. Yeah, I expect a lot of deaths. Absolutely. You're going to get plenty. It will happen. And it's all right. That's fine. Okay. Hey, thank you to everybody who showed up. Remember the dice giveaway down in the description. Remember, I'm back in a month to talk about the Curse of Strahd. So thank you to all of my patrons who support me so much and had to deal with all of the changes that happened recently. Thank you to everybody who's had to deal with the fact that I don't release an edited version of my live streams anymore because YouTube just made it too difficult. So thank you for showing up for all of that. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the very, very early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.